When you walk into a party, there's always that one person dancing like no one's watching. Let's call her Stephanie. Now, there's a few assumptions Stephanie needs to break. For one, she needs to break the assumption that people care what she does. Another, the assumption that others will be uncomfortable by her unique dance moves. Then there are the Davids, who awkwardly dance in the corner but secretly wish they had the confidence or ability to dance just like Stephanie. Like you, I know a few Stephanies who have that unique ability to go out there and dance like no one's watching. I actually love dancing. I remember early on in middle school, I'd go on YouTube and look up different dance moves like the moonwalk, and I'd teach myself. Wanting to take a more formal dance lesson, I convinced my encouraging mom to take me to the nearest place, which happened to be a ballet studio. We signed me up for a lesson, and it was fun. But I never went back. You see, unlike Stephanie, courageous dancer, I was terrified by the thought a friend would see me walking in, a word would get around middle school that I'd be thought differently of. So because of my assumptions, I decided to stop dancing. Luckily, I started to uncover the Stephanie in me when I got my first skateboard. I remember tearing off the plastic and just holding it in my hands with adrenaline rush of sheer excitement. I put on the grip tape, screwed in the metal skateboard trucks, and popped in the wheels as I quickly rode down the rabbit hole. Skateboarding enabled me, this is me when I was younger, skateboarding enabled me to be that awkward dancer in my own little world with just my board and myself together. And the thing about skateboarding is you get in this little zone, kind of almost like dancing, when it's you have your go-to moves, your own little groove, and unique style or even signature. Skateboarding really enabled me to be stable even when on wheels. The other thing about skateboarding is it taught me to see the world as a jungle gym. If I were to ask you what's behind me right now, you'd probably say a staircase. If I were to ask a skateboarder that question, they wouldn't say a staircase. They go on a rant about all the cool things they could do with or off the cement object. 360 variable kickflip, pop shove it, no comply, whatever. Skateboarders see these stairs and don't think about what they are or why they exist. They simply think about how they want to interact with them. By seeing these stairs from an angle of curiosity and asking myself, what can I do with these cement stairs, really taught me to see the world without prior assumptions or limitations. As my obsession grew, I started going to more skateboard events. Fall of 2013, I found myself at the notorious Broadway Bomb, a downhill skateboard race, not through the mountains of Vermont, but right down 8 miles of Manhattan. Now, the Broadway Bomb was considered an outlaw event, meaning New York never actually endorsed it. Actually, police were handing out flyers saying, "You may be arrested." Turns out they weren't lying, and I was later arrested, but did community service. It's all good now. Story for another time. At the start of the race, I remember in front of me was this line of police officers with this net, and behind me was a fence separating us from Central Park. As I counted all the colleges that would never consider letting me in with a police or criminal record, I heard someone in the crowd shout, "Climb the fence!" In an instant, hundreds of skaters were up, over, and jumping into Central Park with their boards in hand. We were going to skate the race, whether the law liked it or not. Now, the experience I just shared is a classic skater story of rebellious teenagers. But as the event continued, I noticed something weird beginning to take place. Other riders motioned for me to go on crosswalks and turn corners only when watching out for traffic. Older friends told me to stop at red lights. We all carried our boards through areas like Times Square. Being kind and following the rules while skating became the underlying objective of the event. At first, I thought this race was about telling the world we're proud skaters who will skate or die, as the saying goes. But no. It was about showing the world, but no. It was about breaking the assumption that skaters are trouble by showing the world how damn respectful a skater can be. We weren't running from the police anymore, but just showing them, we'll play by the rules, just let us skate. As the annual race continued to take place on every third Saturday in October, the arrest warning stopped. The nets police initially set up slowly faded. On the fourth year going, I remember one of the officers who happened to be a skater himself joined us. We were breaking a cultural assumption, one rebellious race at a time. I found this idea, this action of breaking assumptions is really the only way change is possible. And seeing these other skaters around me break them inspired me to do the same. Wanting to get more involved in this community of assumption breakers, I thought about starting a project where I'd buy and sell skateboards. I had the assumption that no one would really take a 13-year-old seriously, but I was really inspired by the skater mindset and recognized the worst case was I'd lose a salary I earned cleaning dishes at a hot dog place after school. So I started selling boards at local events and building a team of riders who would compete while using our gear. We called the project Easy Boards. As I got more and more into it, we actually started looking into the assumptions around skateboards and found that boards were either for downhill or for tricks, but never both. And the second one, that they often cost over $150. So we attacked the assumptions, trying to create a downhill trick board that would sell for under $100. I built prototype after prototype, my team of riders, and eventually manufacturers. This is Seth from Florida, one of our riders, and Carl from the Philippines with a daughter. As the years went by and we built our team to 40 riders across 7 countries, we mass-produced boards and got in stores across the country. Now, the reason I started the skate company in the first place was to really help give more access to skating and help others learn the skating mindset so they could break assumptions in their own lives. Curious about other ways to increase access, I started looking into emerging skate communities. Mainly those are in areas with less resources. One of the early projects I found was construction of Ethiopia's first skateboard park, built around a youth center. Asking if there are ways to help, they recommended sending gear and running fundraisers. So we did. With help of over 1,000 donors, we eventually landed in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to see firsthand the true impact a skate park had on a local community. We called the project Skate for Africa. The first day in the park, I met a boy named Babu. Babu had this big smile, a soft look to him, was around 12 years old and stood about 4'10". And I remember Babu well for a few reasons. First, he had this glare in his eye, a pure determination. And second, he could drop in and do any trick he wanted to, all while wearing flip-flops. I thought I was badass because I skated in these ripped shoes, but here was Babu showing me how wrong I was. I stereotyped and created assumptions around who a skater was and how they skated. Babu was breaking assumptions I hadn't even realized were there, reminding me, again, of why I love skating in the first place. As we rode the park, I noticed water seeping through the cracks of the concrete. This boy could skate so well in a less than ideal park with less than ideal shoes, then what's actually needed to be a skater? This led me to research the fundamentals and question how and why parks are made the way they are. I found they can take years to build, rely upon the soil under them to avoid drainage issues, and concrete is one of the largest producers of carbon dioxide. I thought maybe these barriers were derived from the sheer nature of parks as we know them today. And so, thought through the assumptions. First, parks are made of concrete. Second, they rely upon the soil to avoid drainage issues and support the park. Next, they're on one location. You can't move them from one place to another. even regardless of the season. They take, it's typically $45 a square foot, and it can take actually years to build. It was that staircase from earlier. You always have the ability to walk down, but see if you can get a bit jiggy with it. So, we try to challenge the assumptions. First, instead of concrete, maybe it could be recycled material. Instead of soil that we have to rely upon, maybe it could sit on top of the park. I lived in Boston, which is a sheet of ice 6 months of the year, which hasn't changed much here. Maybe there's a way that it can move from one place to another. Florida 6 months of the year, and Boston the other 6. And if we cut down the prices, if we change the materials being used and scale up production, maybe we could cut down prices. And finally, instead of years, what if it took months, weeks, or days? Thinking it through, we just kind of started throwing ideas on the wall, and eventually came up with the concept of using an old shipping container as the base. Not really sure how this would look. I started sketching some lines and invited friends in the local skate community to help think it through. Eventually we came to this kind of funky design, but didn't really make much sense. So we rethought it and figured, what if the sides were to fold down? And came to this concept. From there, we thought, let's add some more components to it, so it's actually more of a skate park. But we realized that it takes away from the structural integrity if you take off the top of the park. So we ended up going back to the drawing board. We thought, back to this idea of the Broadway bomb, where trying to change the assumptions around who skaters are and the perception of skaters. So we figured, let's make a community space that's more artistic and open for other people to get involved aside from skaters. And we came to this as the most recent version. And we figured, what if we put multiple of these parks side by side to enable more variety in skating? We found this model could upcycle 3,500 kilograms of steel, wouldn't rely upon the soil under the park, could be moved from place to place, would cost $25 to $30 as opposed to $45, and once manufactured, could be set up in under an hour. We, as of February 1st, we started manufacturing our first park, super exciting. And as of now, although we're probably far from the best version of this will be, we thought, I really do hope that this is getting closer and bringing skating to every corner of the globe. I've learned or tried to start looking at the world from a skater mindset, a place where assumptions don't exist, but rationality does. The question of why things are the way they are often go down this tunnel of because they've always been, or because my biases dreamt them to be. Past assumptions are simply arbitrary. My skateboarding and Stephanie's dancing journey has been a battle against assumptions. It happens to all of us at some point in time when we assume what's possible, or we assume what's impossible, or a limitation. But what I will say is, if you can find the things you can do like no one's watching, it's much easier to start breaking assumptions and finding the things worth breaking assumptions for, like us lessening police resistance, or like Babu, showing me what's really needed to be a skateboarder. If you can learn and get in the habit of breaking assumptions in your everyday life, then when there's one big, hairy assumption standing in your way, you have the power to look at it in the eye and tell it to screw off. The last thing I'll say is that as of a few days ago, I signed up for my second dance lesson, and I have skateboarding to thank.